Welcome back to the security stream. And for those of you, I know most of you know me, I'm Jamie Pease, I'm the chair of the security stream. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome back John sorry, John, you know I always struggle with your name, Pinkowski.
That's fine, Jamie. I've heard worse. I've heard worse.
And Matt Grider, welcome to you both from Broadcom. I know, John, you came and presented to us last year. I think, Matt, it's your first time with us, isn't it?
This is, yep.
Yeah, so you're both very, very welcome. So this is session 8BA, folks, for the purpose of feedback. So we'll talk about that towards the end of the session. You've heard a lot about, over the last few days since the conference has been running, about zero trust. And it's a term that you're going to hear more and more about. It's not a buzzword anymore. It's kind of here. It's a reality. And I'm really looking forward to Matt and John's session to tell us what they have to tell about it from the mainframe and cloud perspective. So over to you. The stage is yours. And thank you. Welcome back.
Thank you, Jamie, and welcome everybody. It's a little early here in the States. I know Jamie said it's just about noon there, I believe, in the UK. Thank you for joining us. And Jamie, thank you again for the invite to be part of GSE. As Jamie said, I have presented at GSE, the conference and the security working sessions. I've been around Share. Hope those of you that can come to the States can attend Share at the end of March. We're trying to do a in-person version. I know the States just opened up their borders so we can travel again a little bit. But that being said, I hope everybody's staying safe. Today's session, those of you that were at GSE last year, myself and Marianne Furno did a zero trust overview from a mainframe ESM perspective. This year, what we did, partnering up with Matt, we decided to break it down into a little smaller piece and actually say, well, how can I actually get started on some of the zero trust ideas from a mainframe perspective? Obviously, also, we're thinking about the cloud implementations. We're working with a number of customers that are moving their mainframe workload to a cloud infrastructure. But what's interesting is they are keeping it on a mainframe. So, people talk about the cloud and think, well, the mainframe's not involved. Those of you that have listened to Greg Lacko speak and everything, we're still running 70% of the transactions on a mainframe. Additionally, those of you that are joining from the States, our president put out a edict to be started to be honored to get to a more zero trust infrastructure and environment. So things are moving. As Jamie said, zero trust is not just a theory. It is real and tangible. And here at Broadcom, we are trying to work with our customers to get to that zero trust model. One of the cool things about GSE, they're always, trying to make sure that, charities, in everybody's mind. Please go to the charity link if you haven't already. I know we're getting towards the end of the sessions, so I'm sure you've seen this. Actually, because I do everything last minute, I was on last night doing this. I think it's a really cool way for us to support other things going on within, our communities. I just have to put the legal brief out there so I don't get in trouble. This session, what we're talking about, I don't think I'm talking about anything that's not GA, that's not out there in the wild from a Broadcom perspective. And obviously we don't talk about, Broadcom products here at GSE. You will see a little bit about that in our demo. But what we like to do is keep the spirit of security and the mainframe being the most secureable platform around. So with that, what we're going to talk about today is, taking a zero trust approach. While we talk about enterprise security, we're going to lean more from a mainframe perspective. That's, really where we live and breathe. As I said, 70% of the transactions are still running on the mainframe. Obviously, there is and has been some migration off the mainframe for smaller applications, but most of our financial institutions, governments, they're still running high privileged workloads on the mainframe. Now, what's interesting is that the zero trust model, people have kind of forgot about the mainframe. We've talked about this over the years here at GSE in the security model, that we do want to be able to treat the mainframe just as another platform. IBM has made it really tangible to, quote, shrink the machines. You don't need the hardware rooms that they used to be there. So why can't we embrace the mainframe for its power of transaction processing? I've seen so many stats that the mainframe is so powerful. Now, that being said, if you have that much data that you need to secure on the mainframe, you really need to be able to look at the zero trust approach to be able to control that data. None of us, whether we're a vendor or a customer, I don't want to see anybody on that front page of the newspaper saying that we've been hacked, especially because of not doing our due diligence of making our platform the most secureable platform. A lot of the hacks that we have seen over the years, if people have just taken some of the simple steps that we're going to discuss today, some of the hacks would not have happened, and they would not show up on the newspaper. And what's interesting about trying, quote, to sell security in the sense of making sure that the platform is secured, it is an insurance policy. Now, what is the risk reward of ensuring that we lock down our platform versus the, whether it's ransomware, which can happen on the mainframe, or just a straight out hack that the data is moved off the platform and we find it in the dark web. We're going to go over today a little bit about we're going to concentrate on privileged users and privileged attributes, getting to that, not only to zero trust, but at least at a minimum, a least privilege model. Because the idea there is if we have IDs on the system that can access high privilege data 24/7, if we can minimize that risk and go into a model that you only get what you need when you need it, sort of how our supply chain is working right now, not so well here in the US. But the idea there is to be able to say, well, if myself, Matt, or Jamie have access to libraries 24/7 that are critical, such as APF libraries, do you really need that? Mark Wilson, Chad, they have all preached to us over the years, over and over and over again, that, if we lock down these libraries from the idea of a 24/7 access, that we would be in a better spot. So we're going to go over that a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to break this up into two pieces. We're going to have the normal PowerPoint session to discuss what we're going to do, and Matt's going to drive us through a simple use case. We did record it, but it is recorded on live systems. We didn't want to take a chance of losing systems in the middle of our demo. So we're going to do a little bit of a live sort of pseudo live demo on how you can control privileged IDs. And please, any questions during the PowerPoint piece, Sue and Jamie are going to be monitoring the chat for questions, or you can unmute yourself and ask the questions so we can make these as interactive as possible. While the demo is running, obviously we'll wait till after the demo and answer any questions. Please ask questions though. I was talking to a colleague today, or yesterday actually, and it was kind of funny. We always say there are no stupid questions, but I'll be honest, I'll give you some stupid answers. So just stop me and we can have any kind of discussions. So a quick agenda, we're gonna go high level. As Jamie said, I know you've heard about what zero trust is. So we're just gonna talk about it very simply, what our perception of zero trust is. We're going to go over 3 easy steps of, to progress to zero trust. Myself and Marianne did a session where we had, about 10 different things you could do, from an ESM perspective, and getting to zero trust. We're going to concentrate on 3 easy steps. Obviously, we always want to validate and verify the mainframe boundary within the example and use case that Matt's going to go over. We're going to show how that boundary can be implemented. I know a number of customers are doing this very well, and we've been working with them as a partner to get that boundary as tight as possible. We do know that there's some limitations still from a mainframe perspective to be able to get the boundary protection as tight as we can, whether we're going through COM server security and or source controls. But with IBM's help, they keep improving on that infrastructure layer. And if you can go to some of the COM server sessions that are available, whether it's GSE or Share, they're very interesting sessions on how you can strengthen that boundary protection. As always, verification of the use of privilege attributes, which is very important in a RACF ACF2 top secret system, to be able to control those attributes, minimize the use of those attributes where you can, and then be able to audit them throughout the life cycle of the use. And then obviously authorization of roles of who can exercise the privilege activity. Now at this level, we're going to be talking about the access to specific data sets, not necessarily the privilege attributes, which is a global discussion, but also you can look at it from the roles that users are doing to ensure that they are in a least privilege and that you're monitoring and doing cleanup on a regular basis to ensure that that authorization of roles doesn't have scopes creep. The zero trust is a fundamental shift in security. What's interesting about that, we've been preaching data-centric security for I don't know how long. I've been in this space, almost 30 years. In the last 10 years, for sure, we've been really concentrating on data-centric security model. So when we started talking about zero trust, we were already a little bit ahead of the curve from the data-centric model, especially from a mainframe perspective, because that was, quote, a buzzword, a few years ago. And we've kept that message very strong. But now with the idea of never trust and always verify added to the top of that, I think our platform is in a great position, again, if we're good stewards to the platform. We want to ensure that we're continuously verifying, validating every user, every application that's being added. And now in this global economy where we're working from home, here at Broadcom, we are back in the office. But the idea of the devices that are now trying to connect to the mainframe. I have worked directly with, I don't know how many customers that they're keeping the data on the mainframe, but they're moving the applications off the mainframe that access the data. So think about how that expands the need to ensure that those connections and those people that are coming in are re-verified. And we've talked about it, that's also going into, while this isn't zero trust, it also goes into the idea of performance enhancements, because these customers are building, and it's great, building APIs to be able to get to this data. But one of the things that is overlooked in a lot of cases is the performance implications that can have, because our mainframe was tried and true for persistent sign-ons and persistent security environments. Now with the moving to APIs, that persistence is lost in a lot of cases. So we've had to work with a number of customers that as they go from test to production, that they see performance degradation that has to be looked at because of the lack of that persistent security environment. Now the good news is that means that you are verifying each one of those transactions in a space, because every time you come in, you're doing another sign-on. The bad news is every time you're coming in, you're doing another sign-on for verification. So we have a number of initiatives going on with IBM to be able to get that stateless security concept into the mainframe, having a one size fits all security context that can be translated from off-platform to on-platform. So you'll be hearing a lot about that in the coming months and going into next year, as IBM gives us the infrastructure to be able to do that true single sign-on. We're going to look at 3 easy steps to progress to zero trust. We're going to look at the mainframe in the enterprise. The use case there is, being able to sign on from a VPN to the mainframe. A number of you, way ahead of the curve on that. Where we're not as strong that we're seeing in a lot of customers is the controlling of the privilege attributes and the existing roles that customers have. The just-in-time shopping for privilege use and existing roles is a big discussion here at Broadcom and other vendors to ensure that you do have just-in-time access to things. Matt is going to go over a simple use case. Obviously, if you want to have discussions, to further discussions on that, please reach out to any of us here at Broadcom. We're always willing to talk about the progression of getting to zero trust as a partner. We love to talk about this, and we're talking to more and more customers. For whatever reason here in the States, the financial institutions are taking the lead on this. Even without the government mandates that were just put in this year, we have had the most conversations with financial institutions about the zero trust model and the least privilege migration this year. It has kind of started in the government side, and we're dealing with more government, whether it's state and or national government. So we are starting to bleed into that, but for me, being using a bank a lot, the idea of the financial institutions looking at this is really a good sign that zero trust is taking hold and people are starting to adhere to it. Quick summary of what we're going to look at, from the demo perspective. We're going to start with the mainframe in the enterprise. If you look at that yellow circle, the idea there is that that's where the VPN and the zero trust policy engine runs normally, to be able to, again, not trust anybody, verify everything before you even get across to the mainframe. We will be showing we're very strong in getting to the point that we want to have no passwords at rest. More and more customers are going to an MFA environment, multi-factor authentication environment, which is a cool trend to see. Whether they are retiring their passwords, that's a little risk reward type. We're talking to a lot of customers that are afraid to actually get rid of their passwords totally. They always want that insurance policy that they have a fallback to your tried and true ESM passwords. We do have a number of customers that are over that fear, that they've been using MFA now longer on the mainframe. Interesting, GSE last year, I think it was in the working session, that we still have customers that are using uppercase 8-character passwords. That is a little concerning to me, but I also understand that, in this space, we don't move like terribly fast. So I can kind of understand that, but we really have to start, kicking it up into high gear into getting to, the idea of a stronger authentication, whether it's password phrases, which, have been around, over a decade on the mainframe, and or at least uppercase, mixed case, add some kind of strength to that password checking. Very interesting conversations with some of those legacy products and or in-house application. The other thing that we definitely want to look at is the idea of the privilege attributes. Whether you're running RACF, ACF2, or top secret, they all have their bucket of privilege access attributes. What we are trying to do is make sure those privilege attributes are used when and only when they are needed. I kind of equate it to, there was a big push for UID 0, right? Get rid of UID 0. You shouldn't have applications that run UID 0. I don't know why that discussion isn't as strong with the ESM attributes. Because you could use the same argument that you should not have hundreds of security and or specials, IDs running around. I mean, that the same argument could be used. It's very interesting that it's not used as strong. Everybody, with the USS discussion, get rid of UID 0, been preached by Mark Nelson, and others over the years. But we're to start to take look now at the ESMs and what privilege attributes you should be monitoring and or trying to remove from your users. And then finally, the idea of existing roles. We talk a little bit about role creep with the idea of people being onboarded and offboarded, especially in this COVID environment. We have seen a number of customers basically lose control of their privileged accesses for resources. Always looking at getting to a least privilege at quote the least, but getting to that total zero trust with existing roles. I mean, we want to be able to look at an environment that has many roles, and then making sure that those roles and the ability to control those resources are looked at almost continuously. We've had a number of customers that we worked with that looked at each individual role, whether they use the Secure Compliance Event Manager to monitor that role, and then to go take a step back and to ensure that the role was only getting the access that they needed. I understand that this is not a turnkey process. This is definitely a journey. But us other vendors, we're all here to help you get to that zero trust, least privilege model. Just reach out to us for any help. We're going to look at the simple steps. I touched on implement stronger authentication. That is foremost one of the easiest things you can do. Takes a little work about looking at your applications and some of these legacy applications, because the mainframe's been around a long time. But we want to make sure that you're increasing your password length. What's interesting about this is I've been talking about this, Mark Wilson and Mark Nelson too, both have talked about this for years. What's interesting about it is we're not moving as fast as we should for our platform. The idea of increasing your password length, I understand some legacy applications, cannot deal with that. But with the multi-factor authentication, there may be a way to mitigate that if you use out-of-band processing, for example, where your applications could stay at 8 characters, but you could be using more of a token-based sign-on to be able to get to a multi-factor authentication by not, with at the same time, not needing to change your legacy applications and leaving those as 8 characters. Now, the only pitfall of that is a learning curve for some of the users if you go to an out-of-band process. And if you've gone to a lot of multi-factor authentications, whether it's from Vanguard, IBM, Broadcom, this could be a way to mitigate the idea that those legacy applications can't change. Also, get to AES 256, at least get to AES 128. We keep preaching that. The passwords at rest, those of you that are staying on passwords at rest, we want to make sure the encryption is strong as possible. Touched on a little bit, and this is why we're talking about control the privileged account access. Matt's going to do a quick demo on how there's one way to do this. Trust me, we are not saying which way is the best way to control your privileged account access, but we want to make sure that you are thinking about this, whether it's homegrown solutions, because we have a number of our customers, even some of the financial institutions that have built homegrown processes to be able to give temporary authority, whether it's adding another profile in top secret or adding a privilege on an as needed basis. There are vendors, including Broadcom, that are trying to mitigate this and make it easier for you to do that. But the important thing is that you should be looking at how do you get to this, environment to be able to control these privileged users. Get rid of that shared ID if you're still using shared ID, especially if you're using shared credentials. I mean, that would be probably the lowest hanging fruit to do. Use password vaulting at a minimum. But integration with service desk, make sure that you have that audit trail for the auditors to be able to say, yes, I gave Jamie this privilege at this time for this amount of time, and it was fully audited, and there was a checks and balances, whether, for a business value with integration to a service desk. That's the type of place you want to get, but it doesn't have to happen all at once. I mean, you can do a lot of these things in-house manually, but as vendors of the platform itself, we're looking to help you. If you have a problem in any of this, reach out to your favorite vendor and have a discussion about this and how to make your life easier. Finally, monitor those privileged user accesses. While we talk about external hacking and everything, we also want to look at who's using internally these privileged users. A lot of times, the foxes in the henhouse type thinking, that we want to be able to make sure that we trust our people. Obviously, that's what it comes down to. But when they're doing anything in a privileged manner, whether it's, installing new product, that has access to APF libraries and or your security settings, giving out privileges that shouldn't be given, you should be monitoring these privileged users. I know some people think that's the big brother effect, but you have to remember, this is your business, this is your data, this is your brand in a lot of cases. What we don't want is, we don't want to lose it. I know a number of you, what companies you're working for, your brand is the be all end all. If you can't prove that you're trying to be good stewards with the data that you're collecting and or using, I think you're doing a disservice to your customers and to your brand. With that, I am going to turn it over to my partner in crime here, Matt, to give you a quick demo of how you can start doing this. Matt, all yours.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Matt Greider, and as I'm stealing the share here, just so you guys know, I'm a part of Broadcom's mainframe security development team. And as John mentioned, we pre-recorded this session, the demo part of this session, simply to hopefully eliminate any hiccups. Sometimes when you're given demos, those can be a little bit frustrating. I also want to just bring up all the things we're going to demonstrate here are ESM agnostic, which is excellent. It means whatever setup you guys have are running, it should run on that perfectly fine. And then finally, as John mentioned, we're just showing you examples of things that can accomplish zero trust, not necessarily the end all be all answer for everything. So with that being said, let me jump into it here. Hopefully there's no hiccups with this one since we recorded it. So. Zero trust security truly is. I'm going to give you guys a couple demos here on ways to achieve that. The first thing I think that's important to speak about is how to limit access to systems as a whole. So in the last 2 years especially, we've become very familiar with the concept of VPNs, right? Virtual private networks. It allows you to tunnel into your private networks as if you were in the private network, but from the outside. It is secure in a sense where it still doesn't allow access to just anybody. But assuming your VPN is compromised, the issue there is that then the attacker has access to any network inside that private network, not just so any node into the private network can be exposed then. With something like Secure Access Cloud, which we're showing here, it actually allows you to go one step further and set up an SSH tunnel directly to the one system that the user would actually need to use. So the way it achieves this is it has profiles here, for example. So I'll click on this one for one of our demo systems. And you can see that it provides you with the username, the actual host name for the client that we're connecting to. So everything needed to connect is in the profile. Then a user could use something like Bitvice to set up the actual SSH tunnel. Now I've gone ahead and copied in the user and host, but I'll show you how we do it. Copy it from this profile and paste over. Similarly for the host name, same thing. Grab this host name right here, throw it back in over top of the host, and then we already have some certificate stuff set up, and then I actually have also set up my IP and port forwarding right here. Those are things you have to speak to your system administrator to figure out, but because assuming we've already done that and we're connecting for like a second or third time here, for example, the user would have all that stuff set up for them already. So they'd go ahead and log in, and they'll probably get a prompt over here to accept or deny, so it's multi-factor. So that's also another security step here. Approve it. We'll go back and double check that we have in fact been authentication completed and our port forwarding is working. So that's great. So if we go ahead and open up a terminal down here, and we're going to connect to the correct profile, we'll see that we were able to go into this TPX system. Formatting is a little goofy. Once I sign in, it should fix it. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in right now. So now that we've limited access to only a single system on our private network, we want to ensure that we can improve accuracy and security around user sign-in. So assuming that maybe the system has been breached, we want to be able to have a little more control over an actual access to the system itself. So if we go ahead and dial in to our mini here, and we log in as our user, this user is actually required to enter an MFA token as part of a secured sign-in. So we use the VIP offering. It allows us to sync these credential IDs to these users, allowing the tokens to be synced across the two systems. The importance of this is, let's say an attacker did get this far. If it was just a password, it's much easier for the attacker to spoof that or brute force it or whatever they would do. And then this tokens reset every 30 seconds. And ideally, they're in a place where only the correct user would be able to access them. So if we go ahead and paste our token in here, see that we get in. So now that we've been able to secure access to our server exclusively, to our system exclusively, and then also improve our validation of and confidence in user sign-in with multi-factor authentication, we have now accessed the kind of the main portion of zero trust security. So let's say that we're signed in as this user, this GSC user 1, and we've removed all permission for him to access any data sets at all. So for example, if you want to jump in this demo Parm Lab, just take a look, he would try to browse it and he would see that he in fact was not allowed to do so. And the idea behind this is that even if for whatever reason user sign is compromised, they wouldn't be able to do anything on the system, anything super important, right? So if we remove important securities from users, even if they might need it in the future, this way if the user is compromised, they won't be able to do that. Now, the next question is probably, how do we allow them to do the things we need them? If they need to do work, how do we allow them to do that? Well, a couple different ways. The product we offer, TAMZ, allows you to give temporary access to different classes or attributes depending on what the user needs to do. So we have had some administration set up. In this instance, we'll assume that you've had administration set up for you and have had appropriate classes and attributes removed from important users so that they require what we call elevations, or adding temporary access to the classes that allow them to do operations through TAM. So just as an example here, we pull up the TAM panels from the left. So this left-hand side might be an administrator who the user on the right has contacted to let them know that, hey, I need to be able to edit this data set to make an update or to do some code. So they're going to go ahead and navigate themselves into the Elevate panel. So this number 2 here. And you're going to see that right now we have, this would be for self-elevation. So if the the administrative user, in this case TAMZ-RO2, would want to elevate itself, which is a possibility assuming permissions are set up correctly. You can't, maybe for auditing purposes, you would want a user to elevate themselves to a class, so then you can track what they do while they're on that class. That is a possibility. Or in this case, we have a different user, so the one we created on the right, we want to see what they have permission to be elevated to. So it looks like they can have access to the sysprogs class, which grants them access to these 3 groups for about 5 minutes is what it says here. So another important thing here is this requires a ticket. So you can require elevations to provide a valid service desk ticket, or you can, TAMZ actually has the possibility to let you code your own validation for tickets as well, depending on how you would want to handle that. So we're actually going to use a custom acceptance criteria for our ticket, and we'll see what that is in a second. But let's go ahead and say, let's give our reason for our elevation, which in this case would be to update our lib, and then we'll give a ticket. And we might bypass, this might be counted as bypassing security a little bit, but in our case, we have a special ticket called pass that will let us get through this check right here. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in that information, tell them what user we want elevated, and select the elevation. So we've successfully elevated this user, and currently on TAMR, you have to actually refresh the sign-in to gain your elevation. So just to show what that means is right now, again, we have our security authorization failure. So this user on the right, which is our GSE user 1, is going to go ahead and log back in to gain his elevated permission. So as we do that, we'll have to go grab our VIP ticket again. Sign in. Okay. And now that we're in, we should be able to navigate back to our data set. And we would be able to edit this, for example, or at least view it, edit whatever permissions were granted here on the right. So we could hop into any of these, take a look around, we could edit them. Test updating data sets. Okay. And we should be able to save it as well. Excellent. So now comes the question of, either you can wait for this time box to time out, and when that happens, the user will not be able to access this data set any longer. You can also just use an administrative panel if they have permissions to actually remove the elevation themselves. So in this case, we were just in 2. If you want to see what all active elevations are, you can press 1, and then you can see list active, list all active elevations. We hit 1. We're going to see that this GSE user is elevated to the sysprog class. Let's say we want to remove that before the time box is finished, so we would navigate to de-elevate. We go ahead and select this elevation to remove. As successfully removed, so we're for a 3rd time here. Let's relog really quick. Grab this token. And then we will navigate to our data set just to check to make sure, just to prove that we did in fact have Zero Trust implemented, and then if we were to browse this again, we would get authorization failure. Just to kind of recap everything we've done, again, we used our Secure Access Cloud portal to actually remote into this, on this right side, this user remotes directly into this system and only this system. They would not have permissions to access anything else. Then we want to improve our confidence that the user is who they say they are, and remove the likelihood that if a password's been compromised, that it would be easy to break into the system. So and for that case, we used our VIP token to secure the actual client sign-in on the system, or the user sign-in on the system. And then likewise, if for whatever reason an attacker was able to actually acquire this user's access and get on the system, by default, they have almost all permissions removed. So if the attacker was to attempt to do anything, they'd most likely have an authorization failure, which is exactly what we'd want because we don't want them to be able to do any damage. So if a user was needed to operate, they have two ways depending on how the security is implemented with TAMZ, for example. You could do a self elevation to elevate yourself to the classes that needed to do access, and then that would help with auditing and telling what happened and when. Or you could have it where other users are, or even automation is required to give the elevation to the user for a specified amount of time, allow them to do the actions they need, again, audited as well. And then once that time is up or the task has been accomplished, that elevation can be removed and the user is secured again. Alrighty, so that was a real quick demo. In an attempt to make it smoother, I think I turned myself into a robot, unfortunately. But yeah, that's just a very simple demonstration of kind of like a pre-set up security environment that has zero trust enabled on it already. So John, I don't know if you want to take over there, but all I'd say in kind of closing for my section would be, this was quite simple. The one issue is that, especially with systems with large users, it can be a little intimidating to actually get everyone, set up correctly with zero trust. But once it's done, it is quite a simple process as far as usability. It's not quite as scary once you got to go in and use it. It's really not that bad.
Thank you, Matt. One thing that while we're here, we showed you specific things on our environment that we're exploiting here. Trust me, we would want to talk to you, whatever vendor can give you the solution that you need for your environment. As Matt said, ESM agnostic, we want to make sure that, we're working in systems with RACF, ACF2 top secret. Whether you are going to somebody like Vanguard, who has the ability also to control, 24/7 access, or any other vendor. What we really want to make sure is that you, as stewards of the platform, are thinking in a zero trust, least privileged manner. The idea of onboarding, more, if anything, stop giving out significant privileges. Matt's use case was very specific from a role perspective. Obviously, we talked about the idea that we should be looking at the privilege attributes also, and stepping all the way back to how we're getting into the mainframe. Now, if you looked at the use case that we drove, you saw how many times Matt had to sign on. That's really not the normal implementation that you're going to see. Most customers that we deal with will, interject pass ticket support within some of that processing so that you don't have to use the token all the time. That being said, we work with customers that even for a special transaction, they're requiring, they're really taking the zero trust model seriously to not trust anybody doing that special transaction. So they're having them re-MFA verify, whether it's at the layer of doing the elevation or actually doing the transaction. So we're working with customers that are at that level, especially in the financial institutions, that set limits to say, what, if I'm dealing with anything over $1 million, I want to re-verify. So there are so many layers of security that Matt showed that you can implement, but you don't have to go from 0 to 100 immediately. Take a look, sit down with your security architects and find that sweet spot of where you can start locking down. The key is to be able to get to that least privilege, because if an ID does happen to be compromised, you saw how easy it was to say, okay, that person doesn't have any extra access. We're going to make that hacker jump through hoops that they would have to know about to be able to get there. So the idea there is to keep things as hidden as possible, with the idea that you're trying to control who's got stuff when. Now, the other interesting thing about the idea of a least privilege model is you could actually look at it from the perspective that this could also stop internal mistakes from happening. If you have to take an extra step to get to a privileged authority, in one of my famous ones is we had a sub one because a person thought they were on a development system. They had 24/7 high privileged access within their whole environment. They shut down one of their production systems on accident. So not only can the zero trust model help from a insurance policy perspective, but it can be just as critical as shooting yourself in the foot, because if you're in a least privileged model, you have less tendency of making a mistake and causing an outage that we don't want to deal with. So with that, I will open it up to any questions. Sue, Jamie, do we have anything in the chat that we want to take care of?
Nothing at the moment, John. So yes, folks, I've just unmuted, given you the ability to unmute your line. So if you'd like to ask a question live, or you can also post a question in the chat if you feel more comfortable doing that. But John and Matt, thank you so much for that. We were talking in the session before. Mark Wilson was doing a session around the, I don't know if you joined that respect, the role of sort of systems programmers from a, like a disaster recovery security perspective and so on, and how they sort of help with that sort of ecosystem. And one of the questions that I asked Mark was around this just-in-time privileges. And this session that you've given's kind of sold me even more on it. But you hear the likes of vendors like Microsoft talking a lot about just-in-time provisioning, for privileged access, and I think that it's something that we absolutely have, we have to just embrace in the mainframe world, don't we? And just get on with it. I don't think we're no longer in an era where we can't do things, without, the likes of MFA and that just-in-time sort of privilege management. And it's nice to see it. I don't know what everybody else thinks, but it was nice to see it in action. I've not seen that before.
Yeah, and it's a real thing now, Jimmy. That's one of the reasons we wanted to try to add a demo to this, because take away the products that it's used. I mean, you can do this, simply. I'm not a big fan of shared IDs in any way, but even if you had multiple IDs that a user is granular enough that Jamie has 2 IDs, you could start as simple as that would be the privileged ID, because if that privileged ID gets taken out of a password vault, and or you can audit that privileged ID. So if you ever use that special ID, you can control it that way. So, I always look at it from the perspective, you may not need product from vendors to do some of this. The idea is to start implementing it. Auditors kind of frown on shared IDs, so I never try to preach that, but I am, I do understand, we're under money constraints. We want to make sure that bottom line is tight as possible. So I can totally understand. And if you ever want to talk about ways that you can do this, with your, ESMs as is, whether you add a profile, and have to go through a help desk and add a group to, a RAC FID temporarily, whether it's for a weekend upgrade, like you said, with a maintenance window, or you can automatically time box it with, permissions that can expire after, X number of days. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Jamie, that, Microsoft, the off platforms do preach just-in-time access. I think we can bring this in a mainframe, and you saw it can be done. So my, preaching to everybody is start to think about this, start to embrace it. Even if you're wearing multiple hats, right? Because we know we're running thin on resources in a lot of cases. So the idea that you may not have the checks and balances from the sysprog to the security admin, because a smaller shop may, those lines are blurred. But think about if they have to use different IDs for that work, that could be enough to be able to audit it and to have the checks and balances there. So these conversations are critical to be able to ensure that we get to that model. But I love seeing this. I think it's really cool that the platform can do these things, because I still talk to customers that don't believe MFA is available on the mainframe. IBM, Vanguard, Broadcom, they all have offerings that you can do MFA on the mainframe using your factors that you're using in the distributed side. So it's a real thing, folks. I mean, just, start to look at it, give us a call. We're always willing to talk to make sure that these platforms are secure.
Thank you, John. So yeah, any questions from anybody? It's one question I will ask the audience: is anybody doing this, on their systems? Be really nice to hear if you are, and what your experiences are with it so far.
No, I've got a question.
Okay.
Okay, it was a great presentation. Thank you, both of you. One thing, we keep on about putting MFA on the mainframe, but from a personal point of view, at this moment in time, without that, I'm logging on with a user ID and password for a laptop. I'm using another user ID and password to get into Windows. Then I'm using a user ID, password, and an RSA token to get to the VPN. And then I'm using another password to log on to the mainframe. Do you think that adding another VPN, another RSA sort of token to the mainframe is going to be cost effective for some of the smaller companies?
And that's an interesting conversation we have with a lot of customers, Sue. And it's really a question of, ease of use versus security and talking to your auditors, right? Because the idea is, where will your auditors want that layer of security? Where we want to get to is, we want to be able to get that stateless token to be able to be passed through that whole infrastructure. Now, wouldn't that be cool? But there are some architectural limitations right now on the mainframe that IBM is mitigating. If anybody's looked at the ZS24 updates, the IDT tokens is or JOTS they call them, is the first step to get there, because now that, and right now it's mainframe centric, but the idea is that the infrastructure is being built that we can build a stateless token that can be used to be passed from, through that VPN layer, through comm services into the mainframe. We're not there yet, Sue, but I totally agree with you. You don't want to necessarily have to retrain your users to be able to, do those sign-ins. Most of our customers, when you look at the mainframe level, Matt had an example of signing on to TPX. Most of our customers that we talk to, whether it's the financial institutions or whatever, they only require the MFA process at the session manager level. And then they configure pass tickets. And now with the enhanced pass ticket updates that IBM and Broadcom have put on the ESMs, they've even made the pass ticket stronger from an authentication perspective. So they'll add the extra layer for MFAing, quote, into their session manager. Then all the applications use pass tickets underneath it. So they did add one extra layer. The auditors accepted the pass tickets at the application level. So technically you change one application on the mainframe, you use your token, you get in, you've MFA'd into the mainframe. But it is a question that you have to take back to your companies and your auditors to see where they will accept the MFA processing. But it's an excellent question, Sue.
I think it's not just mainframe, is it? We hear a lot more about other, like if you're using something like, a PAM, another PAM solution, there are other servers and things. So I think it's a problem everywhere, isn't it?
A lot of our companies are still, as you say, using the 8-character uppercase password.
Yeah, I get goosebumps when I hear that, Sue. But
yeah,
it's true.
It's true. And obviously we don't call out our customers or anything like that. But we're here as vendors, to help, mitigate those issues. And if there's a problem with a specific application, for example, it was interesting. I was talking to an Austrian customer. They happen to be running ACF2. They're trying to get the password phrases, right? And what they want to do is they want to implement it such that the password phrase technically has no spaces in it, so they're just wanting to take long passwords, for lack of another word. But obviously you have to activate phrase because that's what the platform requires to be able to consume more than 8 characters. So, if there are mitigating circumstances that require some tweaking, talk to the vendors. I mean, we're here to help, besides make money, but we're here to help, because in the end, if we keep the platform secured, you're making money as a customer also. And that's, while we're trying to get the zero trust, we all know that the C-level is looking at the bottom line. So we want to try to partner up with you to ensure that we get rid of those 8-character passwords. Whether we retire them totally or not, we'll see.
Any sort of final closing thoughts? Any questions for Matt and John?
As Jamie said, please fill out the feedback. We do look at these. We had, every session I do, I make sure I try to go back. We're trying to make these better. We want to make them more informative to you, because obviously we preach this daily. We're talking to customers all the time, but these GSE sessions, and Jamie does a great job with the GSE formats. We want to make this better. So please, anything, give the information to Jamie. We'll be talking about the next GSE session shortly. So please give us some input.
Thank you so much. Once again, great job. Thanks, John and Matt. So on that point of feedback, just a quick reminder that the first question there, what was the length? Is the length of presentation correct? If you score a 9, that means basically that their session was too long. So it's the best answer for that is 5, that you're happy with the length of session, or whatever you feel what you want to put. And then but that's the only exception to the scoring for these presentations. And remember, folks, that the feedback is important from your perspective for claiming things like CPE points if you need those for certifications. Also for the presenters to, like John said, how well they're doing, and just for us at GSE UK to understand, for planning for future events, what you'd actually like us to put on for you. So do that. Don't forget the charity as well that John mentioned. I said earlier on, I just looked, actually we're over at 72% now of our target, which is fantastic. So if you really like this session, and you're comfortable with donating, please do go on to the GSE website. Look at any of the agenda items where you see Virgin Money Giving, you can click there. John and Matt are going to upload their presentation to the website, so you can download the PDF. But of course, this session has been recorded, so in a few days' time, you'll be able to listen to a replay of this. And if people haven't heard it, they'll be able to listen to this on demand if you're a GSE member. Up next, we have a lunch and learn. So that runs from 1 o'clock till 2, and it's actually a security session, folks. So if you are interested in joining that, please do. And of course, it will be a breakfast session for some of you, right, John and Matt? Or maybe a dinner session for some of you. So hopefully you can join us for that. At 2 o'clock, we are back in the main security stream, if you want to stick with security for the afternoon. So we've got Bob Hansel, who is joining us to talk about the Unix class. So some of you may have come across Bob. He does the surveys on RackFL on a regular basis, and has contributed a lot of material on his website around some good practices there around exploiting things on Mainframe. So do join us for that if you can. But once again, thanks, John. Thanks, Matt, for the preparation work you've done there. I think the demo worked really, really well. It's thank you for that. And I'm sure you'll be coming back to us at some point in the future to give us some updates on this world of zero trust.
we hope we get an invite, Jamie. We're always available for you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
See you soon. Take care.